This man's gamble in Bangkok has failed desperately. But this heroin seizure is a drop in the ocean. For the hundreds of tons that do get through, Thailand is the major transit point. But the world's major producer is Burma. Earlier this century, Burma was one of the richest nations in Southeast Asia. But for the past 30 years, it's been stuck in a time warp, poverty-stricken and closed off from the world. Under the rule of the military, Burma is now Myanmar and Rangoon has become Yangon. But Mandalay, a name to conjure with, remains the same. It's not just the romance that's attracted people to Mandalay. This has always been a vital trading post between the mountains and the river. For centuries it's been the hub for gems, timber and rice, and recently the more valuable commodity of heroin. Foreign journalists rarely gain access to Burma, and when they do, it's always for a reason. This time we're here to be shown what the military government is doing about the drugs trade. These are the men from SLORC, the rulers of Burma. International pariahs since their brutal suppression of the pro-democracy movement in 1988, which left 3,000 people dead.
မွေးစေဝါပပျောက်ရေးကိုအကူအညီပေးခဲ့တာလဲ88ခုနှစ်မတိုင်ခင်ထိအကူအညီပေးခဲ့တာတွေရှိတယ်ဒီဘက်နောက်ပိုင်းမှာအကူအညီပေးမှုကြော့ပါသွားတယ်သို့တော်လည်းပဲကျွန်တော်တို့က88ခုနှစ်မတိုင်ခင်ကလည်းပဲမွေးစေဝါတိုက်ပြတ်မှုတွေကိုကျွန်တော်တို့အစိုးရအနေနဲ့အတတ်နိုင်ဆုံးလုပ်တယ် But some claim that in this part of the world, governments themselves are players in the heroin game. One of their accusers is Burma expert and journalist Bertil Lintner.
Drug-related corruption is endemic in all the countries around the Golden Triangle. Thailand is not the only example. Burma, China, even Laos, vast quantities of heroin go through those countries with official complicity. In China, for instance, several reports indicate that army trucks carry tons of opium up to Kunming and on to Hong Kong and Canton for export abroad. In Burma, vast quantities of heroin go down to Mandalay, from Mandalay up to the Indian border, and again we see heroin being transported in official vehicles.
To see for ourselves, we head north on the Burma Road. We're heading to the Golden Triangle, a region the world sees as notorious, but the SLORC now hold up as a success story in its anti-drugs campaign. One irony of this country's long isolation is that unlike with its more open Asian neighbours, many of Burma's traditions have been preserved, like this Buddhist coming-of-age celebration. Over the steep mountain passes first built by the British lies the military stronghold of Lashio. Since the days of the Raj, this gate at the town's edge has been a local customs check for all manner of traffic. This agent is searching for drugs. Heroin produced in the nearby mountain valleys on Burma's side of the Golden Triangle. Lashio is a borderland where the faces of the Burmese are replaced by the hill tribes, the traditional growers of the opium poppy.
And is this good quality or is this just...
Army and police officers say they stop all they can, but critics say these seizures are nothing compared to what gets through for a price.
But they're not involved in the trade in the sense that they buy and sell opium or heroin. They will be involved in providing protection for convoys, for instance truck convoys going from Kokang, the Chinese frontier, down to Mandalay. And then there's about 7 or 8 checkpoints along that road. You need official permission to pass those checkpoints. You can get such a permission, if you pay the military in Lashio, for instance.
But in Lashio, the military commander denies such accusations.
Is the major convinced that the police officers and the military people on the road, the lower ranking people, are in fact all completely honest with their work, that they're not involved?
Up here, the roads are almost impassable. There's virtually no infrastructure and villages are poor. Our first stop is with the Wa tribe. Just a few years ago, Burma was at war with the Wa people. Now it's teaching them how to grow crops to replace the poppies they once used to fund their fight. For decades, the Wa guerrillas have fought Rangoon for more autonomy. While they've reached a fragile ceasefire with the government, they remain ready to fight if SLORC impinges too far into their hill country.
How dependent are the Wa people on the production of heroin and opium?
But drug agencies say the Wa are still the biggest poppy growers in this, the world's biggest heroin producing region. It's here, right at the top of Burma, that you begin to see the difference between SLORC PR and reality. This is as far as you can go on the Burma Road. Across the bridge is China. This side is controlled by Wa and Kokang insurgents. Both groups in the past have been major producers of opium and heroin. But this is also as far as the Burmese army can go. even in their own country. It's where Rangoon's writ runs out. Its army can only operate here with permission from the Kokang tribe. As part of the ceasefire agreement, these guerrillas remain armed, and it's they who let us across their line to see what progress the agreement is bringing them. Until the ceasefire, these mountain valleys were covered with poppies, a source of income for the villagers, a means of buying weapons for the guerrillas. As an incentive to persuade them not to grow poppies, SLORC is building schools, hospitals and houses. Roads too, but that's a touchy point here. Some tribal leaders argue they are a Trojan horse for the Burmese army if fighting ever breaks out again. And that's not to be ruled out. Relations are tense and the army's sensitive about its presence here. These were the only government troops we were allowed to film. The truckloads of heavily armed soldiers we also saw were off limits for the camera. This is Lao Kai, a poor village the Kokang call their capital. It used to be surrounded by poppy fields. Now the government says they've been replaced by legal cash crops. But it's an area controlled by Yang Mo Lien, a man international drug agencies still accuse of running a major heroin trafficking business. His son gives us the official line.
就是不种鸦片这个问题了。你说对于这个问题的话，作为人民来讲的话，大家都相当赞成国家的这种做法，也比较支持我们特区政府支持我们这样做。当时的话，就必须要有这个其他的农作物来代替，因为这个地方除了这个种这个东西，没有其他的那个的话，所以说他生活就成问题了。
While the Kokang leaders pay lip service to the SLORC PR line, many of the tribes people don't.
非法行为的，我一定制裁啊！有会采访啊，会采，吃一个瘾罚20块，是吧？非法不可，是吧？他这些小偷小盗，我有权利制裁啊！抄菜，哎，偷人抢人，我一定制裁，是吧？不放这些小偷小盗嘛，啊，偷人抢人，是吧？就是这种干，哎，我的工作就是这个道理。
The Golden Triangle may have an exotic image, but the reality is a harsh land. Even when these people grew poppies, life was hard. But while poppies grew well here, the beans and maize crops that have replaced them are repeatedly destroyed by rats.
哎，那可能比起比那些空囊好些喽。
种鸦片是吧？是。哎，比什么空囊就是一亩差不多就是主要出吃多啊。
那会我老出差不
多，那会我老出的差不多，我老出多了。
也不想种哦，鸦片也不想种，我们来说。
种也不好啊。
种着也这些么土也不好，我们家些是不也不希望种，这些么也不种。
In such conditions, it's little wonder that just a few hours' walk over the mountains, other members of their tribe still grow opium poppies and refine heroin, and that's the dilemma. But until there are genuine political reforms, the West is unlikely to resume direct aid for anything. And that means Burmese heroin will continue to flow from the Golden Triangle.